This is the Analysing Anfield podcast on the Blood Red channel, bringing you the best tactical and statistical analysis of Liverpool FC.
Hello everybody and welcome to this week's episode of Analysing Anfield, your tactics and analytics podcast, courtesy of the Blood Red channel. I'm Josh Williams and I'm joined as always by David Hughes. Dave, how are you getting on?
Yeah, I'm not too bad, thank you, mate. That's it. How are you doing?
You're probably better than me. It's been another weekend of pain, to be honest.
I feel like we're saying this more than ever, aren't we? That seems to be the opening line.
To be honest, mate, I haven't enjoyed the season,
Yeah.
as you can probably gauge. But we'll get into it anyway. We have to get into it. So we'll be talking about Newcastle United, what happened. We'll be looking ahead to this weekend's big game, Manchester United. And on the Liverpool front, really, that's kind of all that's going on at the minute. So it could be a shorter show. We'll see how we go. We might end up going off on a tangent regarding something else. Who knows? But yeah, we'll see how we go. But I think first, starting with Newcastle, Dave, was you at the game?
Yeah.
Thoughts?
Without
the smile.
No, it's not that. It's really hard to summarise because, based on kind of the underlying numbers and the chances Liverpool created, especially in the first half, it could have been on another day quite a dominant victory. Should have been 3 or 4-0 up at half time. But yet, what I will say is it did still feel like there was a vulnerability throughout. And it felt like Newcastle potentially could have scored more than what they did. Obviously, I suppose they had one ruled out for handball. So it was just the one they finished for the day. But I just felt like Liverpool, even though they created a lot of high quality chances, should have had a really good lead going into half time. And before, key plays for Newcastle like Wilson come on. They still felt a little bit vulnerable. That's why I'd summarise it as a bit of a strange game. But to be honest, in that dressing room afterwards, they must have been looking at themselves, thinking like, that was all on us. That because a year ago that probably would have been a 4-1 victory, something like that.
Yeah, to be honest, mate, you know me. I'm not really a nervous fan, and I'm quite positive in the way I look at my team and stuff like that. I mean, long-term listeners of the show will know Chris, and Chris is kind of the opposite. expects the worst at all times. But even in this game, just as it progressed, I just knew what was coming. You could just see it a mile off. And I was getting nervy towards the end. I was just like, just end this game, just finish it, because it's clearly an off day on the finishing side. You're lucky to get 3 points when that happens. Nevertheless, we deserved 3 points. But honestly, those last 5 minutes, truly painful. But when it comes to the performance, I just say Liverpool was spot on. I think the game was a little bit more open than a typical Liverpool game of late, and I think a lot of that stemmed from maybe the use of the 4-2-3-1. I think that does tend to happen. Liverpool have a little bit less control when we use that shape. But as a result of using that shape, you're fielding all 4 of your attackers. They're all top performers, and you should have goals in there. And we certainly had threat, but we just couldn't find the back of the net again. And if you look at the numbers associated with the game, so Liverpool had 21 shots, Newcastle had 7. 69% of the ball for Liverpool. But interestingly, Dave, I don't know if you've seen the expected goals, but it's tighter than I thought it would be. It's go on.
I was going to say, are you on FD ref? Is it?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Liverpool 1.9, Newcastle 1.2. But what I will say, I think I'd be interested to know how much of Newcastle's 1.2 happened in the last 5 minutes. Because it felt like they had a few opportunities in and around the penalty spot and stuff, but up until that point, I don't think they offered a great deal. They certainly offered threat. I think Saint Maximin in particular, he was the problem. I think if he weren't on the pitch, it's probably a really nice game. But he was a real threat, and it actually resulted in us getting, I think, 1 or 2 tweets or 1 or 2 messages about should Liverpool be in for him? You got any thoughts on that one, Dave?
I do really like him. I think he's quite a maverick, isn't he? I think that's a really good summary of him. You give him the ball and he can kind of go in any direction, use any foot, get himself out of tight positions really well. He can create things as a result, bring players, pull players in, create spaces for others. He's a really good asset. I just don't know if he's maybe got that kind of maybe like that.
I think
reliability. Go on.
Yeah, the way that comes to mind for me is maybe robustness, just that kind of almost durability. If he's struggling to play once a week for Newcastle United, and it'd be a case of 3 times a week, that sort of thing, I'm not sure he'd be available enough. I think that'd be my biggest problem with him.
Yeah, well, he has got a really bad injury record, hasn't he? He misses large portions of the season, so that would be a red flag right away. I remember him looking really good when he was in France with, I want to say, was it Nice? Yeah. He looked really good there, and he has shown he can translate those skills over. But yeah, I think the fact he's not reliable. I mean, he seems to take a few knocks on Saturday, and it just seemed to he'd spend. I don't know if it was getting picked up on me on camera, but
I know what you're going to say.
He'd spend like a few minutes constantly kind of like limping a little bit and rubbing his leg, and it seemed like it was impacting him maybe more than it would say like with a Milner who'd make a point to be getting up and not even letting on that he was remotely hurt. Whether that's a huge factor, I don't know. I'm not saying it is, but I just think he's a really good player. He's one to admire, but not necessarily one that you need to then be like, oh, we desperately need to sign that player.
Yeah, still only 24. And I'm looking at his injury history now. At Nice, his injury history wasn't really there, actually. Over the course of a few seasons, it looks like he's only missed about 4 games. But then since he's been at Newcastle, like this season, for example, he's had 3 separate injuries, one with his ankle, one with his calf, one with his groin. And he's missed 10 days, 61 days, 35 days. And last season, he had a hamstring injury, missed 3 games. Another hamstring injury, missed 8 games. So, and yeah, you said there, when he was getting knocked down, when he was the product, when he was kind of on the receiving end of like a heavy tackle or something like that, he did stay down for quite a while. And I don't even think Milner's has to be the example. Even the likes of Mane and Salah, they just get straight up most of the time, at least. And I think with Liverpool's game being really intense, quite intimidating and stuff, I'm not sure that type of player entirely fits. And I do think that he's clearly ridiculously creative and very, very good at solving problems on the pitch, despite being surrounded by very few teammates and stuff. But I do think that when you move to a bigger club, especially with a coach, as commanding as Klopp and Guardiola and stuff, I do think maybe a little bit of his creative freedom would be taken away a little bit, just as a natural result of having to become part of a really established unit. Like there was moments in the game where I'm not sure if it was an instruction or what, but I was quite confused as to why Thiago was clearly running a game and Saint Maximin was just kind of marking space, and I was just thinking to myself, like, I'm not sure if that was me. Just stand on Thiago, because you're not doing anything anyway. You just kind of floating anyway. So just kind of follow him around almost. Rafa Benitez used to do that if Liverpool were coming up against like a top defensive midfielder. Rather than using like a front 2, Rafa would use a striker and a number 10, and the number 10 would sit on the good 6 basically, and stop him from playing. So I don't know. I think there's a fair few ifs attached to his game that I don't think Liverpool would explore. But nevertheless, still a really good player. And I said to you on the WhatsApp over the weekend, Dave, I think I'd rank him above Adama Traore, and that for me.
Yeah. I think on the big club point and the point you raised about, not following those instructions or predominantly implementing the off the ball work. I think you do get that freedom, don't you, when you're that type of player at a club like Newcastle, who are obviously bottom half. You can kind of be a little bit more of an
outlet,
not
really.
a player. Yeah, an outlet. Yeah, a player who can be considered more of a luxury player, or he gets more allowances than others because of the fact because he brings so much and he brings more than what any other attacking player really in that side does. So therefore, it's really hard to kind of criticise him or shackle him without the ball, because you could end up rubbing them up the wrong way, couldn't you? Really, I'm not saying he doesn't do any work off the ball, but it's something that I noticed as well. But he's still a player, really. Like, I'm just not sure if it necessarily be a Liverpool signing.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I think Liverpool, we've said plenty of times in the past, Liverpool are top bracket really, and you need to tick a lot of boxes as opposed to just the unpredictable side when you're on the ball and stuff. I think around that there's got to be a bit more, and I think he's got more than most, but I still think Liverpool can get maybe a little bit better. But still on the game, I don't solely want to focus on the result, to be honest, because I think if Liverpool managed to come out of that 1-0, we still focus on the finishing being bad, basically. But I do think Liverpool's performance was good, and Liverpool did create in attack. Creation wasn't the problem. Liverpool generated really clear-cut opportunities, really. And that hasn't always been the case at Anfield since the turn of the year. So I actually think the performance, the 4-2-3-1, I liked a lot of it. I thought the Milner substitution was spot on, to be honest, because I think around that point, the game was drifting from box to box a little bit. Liverpool had a bit of less control than ideal. So he took off a forward, didn't he, Jota? And he brought on Milner, went for the 4-3-3, gained a bit more control, and it helped the game, I thought. So generally, I thought the performance was good. I disagreed with the Thiago substitution, I must be honest. I don't think that helped us. I can see why he did it, maybe bringing on fresh legs, energy and Curtis Jones and stuff, but I think the direction of the game was quite obvious for me. I thought it was quite clear that it was going to get to a point where we were going to be hanging on a little bit, and you need those players who can just take the ball and just keep it and just control it. And Jones is a bit more of a runner, isn't he? He's a bit more all over the place, legs everywhere, and not so much, a composed thinker of the game, if you know what I mean. I'm not really sure if I'm painting that the right way. But...
Yeah. No, you are. Yeah, I see what you're saying. For me, I don't. So, based on the shots and things, which is something that we look at, XG, and Liverpool really dominant. The only argument, and I've just brought it up to see if it kind of reaffirmed the point I was trying to make, was I'm looking at 538 model, and they obviously have a non-shot XG as well as shot-based XG, and no, it doesn't. Okay, yeah, I was going to say it just felt like Newcastle were kind of given a little bit. Liverpool, maybe for me personally, had a little bit less control without the ball, and it was a little bit more open than what I'm used to. Even when they haven't been having great performances and results, it's always felt like 2/3 of the pitch has been really strong still, and they've just been undone by the one mistake that's led to a goal. Just a bit of bad fortune. But it did feel like sometimes they were a little bit more open than what I'm used to seeing. But maybe that was just an observation I've made.
But even if that's the case, though, to be honest, could you argue that is almost worth taking, considering the shots that Liverpool managed to generate and how we've struggled to do exactly that in the previous months?
Yeah. So basically, you're saying, I did say at the top of the show, it could have been a 4-1 victory on another day, and would you have took a 4-1 win? Yeah. So on that basis, it would have been a good trade-off. It just so happens that, in somewhat of a rare situation, kind of a perfect representation of this season, it's ended up being a negative result. I mean, whilst I'm looking on 538 now, probably the draw was, I think, 14% chance of it happening. And that's obviously what happened.
Yeah, while you're just saying that, then I'm going to check understats, because I think understats will probably be even more in Liverpool's favour, to be honest.
Yeah, it was 80% based on 538, 80% Liverpool victory normally, or based on it being an 80% chance of a Liverpool win.
Yeah, understat has Liverpool 82% chance of winning based on the shots that we took, 12% chance of a draw, and 6% chance of a Newcastle win. But
says it does. It sort of reaffirms it, doesn't it? At the end of the day, that it wasn't a bad performance. Like, don't get twisted. Yeah. Although I'm making that point of saying it felt a little bit open. That's just in the general observation point of view. I'm not saying that suddenly makes it. It should have been a draw. Because I totally agree with what we've just been saying. In that it was a dominant kind of performance that on another day probably ends up in a comfortable victory.
Yeah, it's just the kind of game that, although the absolute shambles at the end is painful to take, it's just the actual performance was deserving of a victory. Klopp couldn't have done much more, because the performance that Klopp delivered resulted in his team creating 21 shots. Should have scored about 3 or 4, really, felt like. But it just didn't happen. And I think, the goal that Liverpool conceded, as well as the goal that Liverpool conceded last week in the last 10 minutes against Leeds, I think both of those don't happen if Van Dijk's on the pitch. And I know you can't really say that, but it just puts into perspective, really how much one proper elite player can just win points almost single-handedly, really. Because when you go late into a game and you start soaking pressure, usually the product is crosses delivered into your box, and Van Dijk gets on the end of all of them. But Liverpool have obviously this season a lot less suited to soaking pressure, because we don't really have much of an aerial presence to deal with those crosses. But I'm just going to take it back a little bit, Dave, to Thiago. There's been a little bit of discourse this week.
Josh, just before we move on to that, can I just flag something quickly? Because I did notice it this morning and thought I did want to flag that when we got onto the subject of it. Just on that point of conceding late goals, I had a quick look to see what it's been like this season, and it's 33% have come after the 75th minute, which is comfortably more than any other kind of 15-minute segments of the game. And the only reason I want to flag that is because it just felt like last season, a big thing that Liverpool did so well with the likes of Van Dijk being available was basically, getting a 1 or 2 goal lead and then opting to sit on it almost, reserve energy to compete in the other competitions, to be able to compete like, a full, although they didn't need it in the end, a full 38 game fixture that, 100% or until the point where you get a victory, and then you can kind of ease off and protect it. And I've just checked last season, so 13 goals conceded after 75th minute so far for Liverpool this season. There was only 6 in the whole of last season, so it's over twice as many so far compared to last season, with another 6 games to go. So it's quite revealing, isn't it?
Yeah, I wrote a piece last week actually, and it was I kind of used Sevilla as an example of what I was talking about. In a short period under Klopp, Liverpool faced Sevilla twice. Once in the Europa League final. Obviously Liverpool took a 1-0 lead and then basically, I suppose, collapsed in the second half, conceded 3. And then shortly after, I think a year later, faced the same team in the Champions League group stages and went 3-0 up in the first half. And that match ended up finishing 3-3. Again, another kind of defensive collapse in a way. And then, not long after that, Liverpool brought in Van Dijk, Alisson and Fabinho, who for me were 3 really elite signings, all of whom are really composed and cool under pressure and stuff. And I looked at the numbers attached to it, Since Van Dijk's injury this season, Liverpool have dropped. Well, Liverpool had dropped. This was last week, so it'll be So Liverpool have dropped 15 points from winning positions since Van Dijk's injury. Whereas beforehand, trying to find the exact number now, but beforehand, 2018-19 and 19-20 combined, Liverpool hadn't dropped that amount. I think it was a total of it was around 10. Trying to find the exact number now in the piece, but I think what I'm getting at is, the influence of Van Dijk specifically in those moments. It's different level, and without him, which Liverpool are going to get him back soon enough anyway. But without him, it is difficult. But I think, on Thiago, Dave, there's been a bit of discourse this week on Twitter. Those who are active on Twitter will have probably seen it. I chose to bit my lip and didn't get involved. But I don't know, just general thoughts on that one. I mean, for perspective, it was some sort of comment around the number of passes he's made this season. Yet he's yet to post an assist. And that captures how bad the season's been, essentially, how his lack of impact or something that it said. I disagree with that. But any thoughts on that one, Dave?
Right. So on this, I think there's a fundamental issue really in how we kind of measure the ability of midfielders or players who aren't directly involved in the finishing of attacking moves. And in my opinion, you're judging a player who predominantly plays in the middle of the pitch. His contributions are, passing the ball to the more attack-minded players, or even just into the attacking third, where you start looking to create attacking moves. If you pitch it like a game of chess, he's probably, his key contributions, come with 3 or 4 moves before the final kind of check or taking of a piece. He contributes way before that. So this is why there's been such an evolving within the analytics data community about trying to find metrics that are more suitable to specific player positions. I think Thiago is a really good example. Like, why are we judging Thiago on goals and assists when his contributions inside the final third are fairly small, because a lot of his main work comes in the middle of the pitch. It's quite irritating seeing really high profile voices in the media show such a reluctance to this, because they're the people who can kind of share it with the man on the street, the people who watch football, enjoy football, and they're the voices who can almost echo this to them so they can learn. But instead they don't. It's for me, Josh, it's quite lazy that they don't, and you end up having these false narratives about players like Thiago, who, by the way, I don't think he's been unbelievable since he's come in, but I also don't think not registering an assist makes you a terrible signing in his position. I guess that's the best way to summarise it.
No, I agree. I think that's probably spot on, to be honest. That's the biggest issue I had with it. As in, like, it's an unfair barometer to judge him on. It's not his bag, really. Like, I think one of the pieces I wrote last season before he came in was that he was kind of going to be the king of the middle third, really, for Liverpool. He was going to be another avenue for Liverpool to progress into the final third. He was going to be, an unpredictable means of arriving in valuable areas on the pitch. AlexanderArnold does that. Robertson does that. Van Dijk, I think, was doing that. But kind of nobody else. Nobody else was really offering, at the drop of a hat like that, we're into a valuable area. And Thiago was going to do that from midfield, central midfield, where no other player was really doing that for Liverpool. So, and he's been doing that. I've just got up now. So progressive passes paying 90. You've probably seen people use it, but I'm sick of hearing it, to be honest. But it's just for a bit of context on what the stat is. It's a progressive pass is a completed pass that moves the ball towards the opponent's goal at least 10 yards from its furthest point in the last 6 passes, or any completed pass into the penalty area. So it's that Thiago pass you picture in your head right now, probably. That kind of line breaker, really. And in the Premier League this season, Thiago's averaging 8.7 per 90. That is the most in the Premier League, in the whole league, against players who have played at least 500 minutes. The only players above him on that, there's 5 players above him on that list, and they've all played about 5 minutes. So, they obviously don't count. So you've got Thiago top, then you've got Trent in second, Kovacic in third. Jordan Henderson, funnily enough, in fourth, but Henderson played a bit of time at centre-back. And then Xhaka. So, these are players that just basically move the team forward and stuff. And Thiago offers plenty. He offers a lot. I think his main skills are going to be shown a lot more next season when Liverpool have got a proper unit, a proper foundation, have the same team every week, if you like. I understand why he maybe fell short in a lot of people's heads, and it's absolutely fine if you fell short in your head and you was expecting what was right of him. But when you're expecting him to start delivering assists and things like that, and even if he had delivered 1 or 2 assists,
two assists,
so what?
Yeah, exactly.
I mean,
Does that change anything? Does that piece that we reference suddenly become a positive piece?
Exactly.
Do you start saying what a signing just because he's got 2 assists?
So what it reminds me of? It reminds me of how people made out that the perception of Pochettino was going to change loads if he picked up a League Cup. If he picked up a Carabao Cup, he's now this winner. It was not going to do anything, to his perception. People see what they say at the end of the day. But in terms of Thiago, I haven't got many worries attached to him at all. I think he's extremely valuable on the ball. And I think he'll show that a lot more next season. Despite the fact I think maybe under the radar a little bit, but I think this season he has shown a lot about what he's about. And I think specifically against Newcastle, I thought he was the best player on the pitch. And I think Newcastle was actually the game that he was introduced for, really. Some people were saying when he didn't start against Real Madrid, some people were saying, this is the game we signed him for, wasn't it? But I was thinking at the time, I'm not sure about that. I think he was signed against these teams that are willing to just sit in a block, and you need to find different ways to break through them. Yeah. All of our ways in the past few seasons have came from the flanks because of Trent, because of Robbo. Now we've got a player who can do it from the middle, and it just gives you another avenue into breaking through. But in terms of worries about him, I've got very few concerns aside from the fact that he's still fouling an unbelievable amount. In fact, I think against Newcastle, I'm not sure he made many at all, actually. But in terms of just for the season, he's still right up there.
Do you think there's a little bit of an over eagerness though? Do you think if he'd settled right in without any of these question marks and Liverpool having a really good season and he was just playing his game, do you think you'd see this as a trait in his game still? Because I just wonder, even for such an experienced player who's played at the highest level for many years, I do wonder if there's just a little bit of an over eagerness to do more, impact the game more when you're on the pitch. Then maybe wasn't for the likes of Bayern, Barcelona before and things. I'm just gonna have a look now and see if I can have a quick look at his files compared to last season.
Well, I actually think.
Yeah, wow. So he's at 2.41 fouls per 90 this season, and it was 1.15 per 90 in the Bundesliga last season. So
is that FBref?
No, I'm just using Wisecout because it's quicker.
Because I'm on FBref here, and in terms of his fouls, only players who have played at least 1,000 minutes, he's third in the league for fouls per 90. The only two players who make fouls more often than he does are Trezeguet at Villa and Ashley Barnes, who we know is essentially a boxer.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think some of it is over eagerness. I've seen quotes from him saying, someone asked him, what's the difference with English football and stuff. And he said, tactically and all that sort of stuff, it's very similar and things. But one thing he pointed out was just the speed of the game. It's just a lot faster. And that obviously bodes worse for a player like Thiago. And I must say as well, in his favour, I would rather a player like this doing what he does, where he's still willing to put a foot in, albeit late, than a player who just lets opponents dance by him. I'd much rather him get stuck in, basically, even though he's a bit late a lot of the time, than a player who's just going to be a complete passenger on the defensive side.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. It's about getting that balance, isn't it? You don't want to be giving away daft fouls because you get punished by them, but you also don't want to basically be that hall pass in terms of progressing from your own half to the attacking half and putting the team at risk. He's just got to get that balance. I think if he settles into his game more, and Liverpool become the team that they were last year, or just something a bit closer, it doesn't need to be as phenomenal as they were last season. If you just become a little bit more settled and more consistent, then I think you'll see a better version of him as a result. And maybe on top of that, as a consequence, less of these fouls and over eagerness.
So before we move on then to Manchester United, we obviously can't really progress beyond the Newcastle game without putting into context Liverpool's finishing for the season and how this is a massive factor behind what's happened, basically. Probably as big of a factor as the centre-back issue, to be honest. So this season, I shared it recently. Liverpool are currently underperforming expected goals by 10.2 goals. Only worse than that are Fulham and Brighton. That basically captures Liverpool's finishing. So if Liverpool finished at an absolute normal expected rate, Liverpool would probably have about 10 more goals than they actually have. For a bit of perspective, at the opposite end, Tottenham have been the best finishers so far this season, I suppose you could say. They've scored 8 goals more than expected. Then Leicester, 7 goals more than expected. West Ham, about 7 goals more than expected. But yeah, Liverpool at the very opposite end on -10. And if you look at individuals, the individual who's underperformed the most in the whole league, Roberto Firmino, on 5.3 goals. And the second most, Sadio Mane, on 5.2 goals. So Liverpool have the top 2 underperforming players in the country. Third, for a bit of perspective, is Timo Werner, who Liverpool also tried to sign.
That could have been a disaster.
That could have been hilarious, to be honest. But people have, I'm sure, picked up on Werner's ability, Werner's tendency to miss status, I suppose. But Mane and Firmino, according to these numbers at least, have been worse with their finishing this season. And again, compared to past seasons, this doesn't happen. Last season, the season before, and the season before, Liverpool overperformed by at least 10 goals. So it's been a 10-goal overperformance for 3 consecutive seasons. Your finishing's delivered 10 more goals than expected for 3 consecutive seasons. And then out of nowhere, not only do you revert back to the mean, but you completely flip to the opposite end of the scale, really. So Liverpool, it's like a 20-goal swing. Liverpool's finishing has resulted in a 20-goal swing from this season compared to last season, which is just, it is baffling, isn't it, David? And it's the kind of thing, thankfully, that doesn't usually continue. It doesn't usually. It's not forever. This should switch eventually. But it's very weird nonetheless.
Yeah. It's you look at that and think, yeah, you can't imagine that kind of underperformance being sustainable. Obviously, this season's done now, with 30 odd games in, so not much is going to change between now and the end of the season. But it appeases fears a little bit for next season that there should be, more of a leveling out in comparison to what's happened this campaign, at least.
Just for a bit more perspective on Mane and Firmino. They've scored 14 goals this season from a total. This is in the Premier League only. 14 goals from 156 shots. That is a conversion rate of about 9%. For perspective on that, I think Mane's conversion rate last season was about 25%, was it? Something like that.
Yeah, I know it was in his 20s.
Yeah, if he's been Liverpool's most efficient finisher for a few seasons, Mane, I think. Salah, for perspective, I think his conversion rate was around 16% or something like that. So yeah, it's one of them. It's absolutely baffling. Those who have signed up to the newsletter will have seen a newsletter I sent out a few weeks ago now on finishing and how it just fluctuates really based on very little. Sometimes you go through heat, sometimes you go a bit cold. And Liverpool's 3 forwards, well, excluding Jota, who's been injured for a period, are just freezing cold this season, and there's not a lot Jurgen Klopp can do about it. That's the frustrating thing.
Yeah. That's
the...
Go on. I was just literally going to say that's the frustrating thing about it. It's not really something you need to be fixed, on the training ground, for example.
Yeah, it's the kind of thing. Put it this way: Brighton are the worst in the league for this. Brighton have underperformed by the most. But what you should get from that, really, if you look at those numbers, what those numbers kind of capture is, okay, the problem is not Graham Potter. The problem is his players essentially putting the ball in the net. That's not something Potter cannot finish. Potter can't put the ball in the net, but he can coach his team to create chances. Essentially, he can coach his team to generate shots. That's clearly what they're very good at doing. They just can't score. And in Liverpool's case, looking at those numbers, Jurgen Klopp isn't really to blame for a lot of that. If Liverpool underperform by 10 goals, there's not much Klopp can do. All he can do is just keep empowering his players to just keep trying and keep doing what they're doing, and they'll come. But it's hard to believe at times. But we'll move on anyway, Dave, to Manchester United. I must admit, I'm not overly looking forward to this one because I don't really know what's coming.
No.
Thoughts?
It feels a very strange Liverpool United game, this. Especially when you consider that it was only in January that, albeit a lot of this talk was coming from Old Trafford and the United side because they were getting very giddy. But, the last one felt like a bit of a title head-to-head encounter. And here we are 4 months later, and obviously it's a strange one. United are obviously all but done, I think, Champions League qualification-wise. Liverpool need the points. But yeah, it's not an easy game. If you have a look, they've lost the only defeat United have had since the 1st of November was that obscure 2-1 defeat to Sheffield United at Old Trafford. That's their only league loss since the very 1st of November, which is insane, really. No, I didn't think it was that as good as that.
Yeah, I mean, I must be honest, I think this is probably the best United team since Ferguson. But despite saying that, I still don't think they're that great. And I still think Liverpool are a better team. Liverpool have just lost all practicality at the minute, and United are very practical because of the amount of match winners, let's say, in the squad, particularly at the business end of the pitch. And obviously, they don't keep a high line. They drop back and stuff, which is quite uncharacteristic. But they can do that because Maguire's good in the air and stuff. But I do think Liverpool are better coached. I think Liverpool can can dominate this team for quite a bit, but maybe without winning a game, which then renders it a little bit pointless, doesn't it? It's a difficult one. I'd like to see, these two teams face off both with a full 11. But it's a difficult one because while being a good United side, I think, they're absolutely fine. I think they're not second in the league good, though. I don't think.
The underlying numbers say that about top 3-4 side rather than the kind of soon to be runners up, don't they?
Yeah, well, I might as well go into them now. I think so. In terms of expected goals per match, excluding penalties, United's expected goals is 5th. They post the 5th best attack in that department, and then on the defensive side, it's 5th again. So 5th best attack, 5th best defense according to non-penalty expected goals, and then in terms of shots, 4th in the table for shots, 7th in the table for shots faced. So that's kind of what I was on about. The performance numbers associated with them aren't really that great, but they do have better individuals than a lot of teams. They don't really expose themselves too much, and those better players that I've just mentioned, they do step up in big moments. You've got Pogba can win a game on his own, Bruno can win a game on his own. They've obviously got a few forwards who are quite skilled at winning penalties.
Accusation there.
No, I don't. I'm not one of them.
Yeah.
I think it's just it's just one of them. I think it's there's a bit of skill attached to it.
Well, it helps to be in the opposition's box, doesn't it, for the start? What game was I watching over? The Everton Arsenal game, and that was a really fortunate game, fortunate goal that they scored to win the game. But it was a reminder for me why you aim to be the team that controls a lot of the play and tries to be in the opposition's box on a regular basis, because in football things like that happen, and touches in the penalty area can result in fouls and penalties. So that's one of the benefits of being on the side on top.
But they've got dribblers as well, and I think Burnley's numbers are highlighted quite a bit, I think, by Sean Dyche, because they haven't won a penalty in about 40 years or something like that. And I think a lot of it stems from who's winning them, who's dribbling in the box. Apart from maybe Dwight McNeil, they don't really encourage challenges in and around the penalty box, really.
No.
And any time the ball is in the box for them, it's usually in the air.
Yeah. So that's it. And they're normally the ones giving away the fouls. So
yeah. I mean, I don't know. I don't have too many opinions on this. I'm not really. It's just a waste of time. I think delving into penalties and all that sort of stuff and bias, but I do think it's helped them this season. I'll double check now as I'm speaking where they are in the league for penalties. So penalty kicks attempted. Yeah, they've had the second most. They've got 9 for the season. Liverpool on 6. The only team on more than 9 is Leicester on 10.
But Josh, just on that quickly though, that summarises the point we're trying to, just been making then. Look at the teams who are obviously leading the way there. Leicester, a top side. United, Chelsea, Brighton, who are just we know what Brighton are. City, Arsenal, Liverpool. So it's all the top sides winning them because they've got, as you said, dribblers.
Even Fulham are up there, and they've got a few tricky forward. Lookman and Cavaliero, and is it Cavaliero?
And then you've got poor West Ham, but you've got like your Burnleys, Leeds, Palaces, Sheffield United winning the least, and this is that. Just think of that narrative that's been going on for 20 years of all the top sides get the penalties and the lesser sides don't. But if you want to get a bit of an indication as to why, beyond just crying it in, that's what we're talking about now is a prime example, isn't it? These trickier players, better players, and being on the front foot more, and therefore having more touches in those areas.
Yeah, that's it. Hopefully, he didn't win a penalty against Liverpool.
Yeah. I should probably caveat it with that quickly.
Yeah. But going back to the over and underperformance thing that I was mentioning before in reference to Liverpool's finishing. United ranked 4th in the table for overperformance. They've scored about 6.7 goals more than expected. Obviously, they've got some top finishes in there. They've got Bruno, they've got Cavani. Rashford, Greenwood's been a good finisher so far. I think he's had a little bit of an off-season compared to last season, although he's coming into his own lately.
Just quickly on that, sorry, Josh, on that overperformance, right? That is a. You would argue that that's not a huge enough one where you go, they're going to fall right off next year, would you? It's kind of still a. There's still kind of a top maybe performer side. In performance-wise, sorry, they're probably like a top 3 or 4 team, and then they have these really good players that can kind of elevate them in terms of returning more points. Would you agree?
Yeah, no, it's probably the amount of overperformance you can maybe expect if you've got good players, I suppose. I mean, last season they overperformed by roughly the same. So last season they overperformed by 6.2. They're currently overperforming, I think, by 6.7. Season before, I think the squad was a little bit different the season before, but that year they overperformed again by about 5.6. So that's 3 seasons in a row there where United have kind of bought themselves an extra 6 goals compared to the average finishes because they've got good players in the attacking end of the field. But I think one of the biggest credits I can give this United side going into this game, they're not a team that I think you enjoy playing against. I don't think I'll enjoy watching Liverpool play against this team because they've got dogs in the middle of the park who just step on your heels and stuff and break everything up. They've got players who can win games on their own. They've got speed. They've got that determination. They're good in the air. They can obviously come back when they got a goal down and stuff. So they are developing into a decent team. I don't think they're the type of team that will just roll over. And I do think it'll be difficult, this one, for Liverpool.
I think one thing that does benefit Liverpool a little bit is the rest. It's is it over the week since Liverpool's last game by the time they meet, where there's this fixture for United is sandwiched in between 2 European semi-finals. So
I forgot about that, to be honest.
Yeah, Thursday night you got Rome and then obviously second leg. So that could genuinely, when 2 teams as good as these going at it. I know Liverpool a little bit by their standards out of form in terms of things like points return, but as we've touched on at the start of the show, performance-wise, it was pretty good against Newcastle. Just didn't get the result. So when you got 2 really good teams, these fine margins, might be pretty decisive, mightn't they? In terms of them having 2 big games either side.
Yeah, it's going to be a tricky game, and I think at Old Trafford, generally under Jurgen Klopp, we haven't had the best record. Sometimes we've deserved more than we've actually got, but for some reason, I think a lot of it's maybe stemming from the crowd. That they've seemed really, really up for it when we went to Old Trafford in recent years. I'm not sure this will overly be the case this time around, considering the ground will be empty. They're above us in the league this time. They're not really having to prove themselves in such a way. So, we will see. Obviously, you mentioned that they've got European semis around the game. They've got less to play for in Liverpool. It'll be interesting to see if Klopp persists with the 4-2-3-1, considering, obviously, the lack of control in this game could hurt you a little bit more, probably. But I'll just see this one going, and Dave, predictions?
Predictions have been so hard this year. Really have, because
I know.
Hard. I'm going to sit on the fence. I think I'm going to go with draw. I expect Liverpool to play well, but United are a decent side. It does feel to me, it just doesn't feel like it has the same edge, this fixture, the way it normally has. I don't know if it's just because it's coming quite late at the end of the season. Liverpool been kind of competing for trophies last few years, and now they're not. This year, I know it's Champions League still there, so I don't know. It just feels weird, and I wonder if maybe the game might play out like that. So I'm going to be really boring. I go for a 0-0.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm gonna say 1-1. But I think it's absolutely possible that Liverpool get done in this game, just simply because of what I mentioned before, how practical United's game is compared to Liverpool at the minute. Liverpool can very easily come across as the better coached team across a number of departments, but when it comes to actually doing the stuff that matters at both ends of the pitch, Liverpool are coming undone this season. So yeah, I think it depends. It just depends on it's going to sound a bit stupid, but how up for it both teams are. You know, how much the European game has an impact on United's game, how up for this Champions League chase Liverpool are, and how down the heads might be after the Newcastle game and stuff. But hopefully, it's a bit of a scrap.
Yeah,
Come on,
yeah.
you going to say
Just
something?
yeah, this is a really completely I guess you call it a rabbit hole on a tangent a little bit, but I just want to ask you something really random. And I was thinking about it earlier, and I was gonna message you, but I thought, I'll just mention it on the show in case anyone else is interested. What's your thoughts, right? Even though it was sort of the start of the season by the players, what's your thoughts on Wijnaldum being Liverpool's captain when he's probably leaving in the summer? Do you think it? I know that's such a random thing, but do you think? And there's key players missing, but do you think you start kind of bending a new captain, or do you wait till the end of the year?
Yeah, it's an interesting shout. Like, I haven't really thought about it much, but it's difficult without knowing the details of him leaving. You know, it's difficult knowing, is he choosing to leave? Are Liverpool just not giving him enough in terms of what he deserves? Do Liverpool just want him to leave and haven't offered him anything? You know, it's difficult to actually know. But on the other hand, I do wonder what message it would send if, despite needing him for the second half of the season or whatever, if you just kind of said to him, well, you're leaving at the end of the campaign, we're going to give the armband to Trent. You know, how would he take that? You know.
Yeah, I agree, and he's still a really important midfielder, isn't he? I was just looking at it, and I was thinking, not that he's an ultra professional. He's still a really good player, brings a lot to the team. But I'm just looking at him thinking, like, that's the on the pitch leader for this side when things aren't going great. I know there's leaders who don't need the armbands. Sometimes the armband's a token, but then other times it isn't. And I'm just looking at him thinking, although this season feels like it's petering out a little bit, Champions League qualification is still there, and it's very important for this side to get it. And there's a good chance that this guy who's the captain isn't probably going to be involved next year. It's not really going to be his thing to deal with. And I don't know. I just feel like, would you be better making AlexanderArnold captain? He's going to be there next year, Scouser, and it's something that we haven't really rehearsed or said we'll talk about. So maybe if we we'd articulate and have a better conversation about it. But I just wanted to ask you.
I think I'd have more of an issue if it was, say, for example, Emre Can, or say last season when Højbjerg was the captain of Saints. I think in those situations it's different because both Emre and Højbjerg think that their peak years were best spent away from Anfield. Whereas Wijnaldum has spent his peak years at Liverpool. He's been a servant at Anfield. He doesn't maybe think he's deserving of a higher level, or forcing a move through, or just thinks he's making a step up or whatever. He's spent his peak years at Anfield. He's won trophies and stuff. So I don't think it's the kind of departure that leaves a bit of salt. I think it's one of them that it's a bit like Thiago leaving Bayern. It's kind of, I think Bayern were very much, if you want a new challenge at this stage in your career, that's absolutely fine because of what you've given us. So I think Wijnaldum is leaving on good terms and stuff. So I haven't got that much of an issue with it, to be honest. And I would wonder what the reaction would be if you said to him, we're going to give the armband to Trent or whatever. But I don't know. I think looking at how professional he is and stuff, I don't think it's had any kind of impact on what's happened on the pitch. But I suppose you never know. It's a good point. Like,
yeah. Just something to throw in to round it off there.
So would you have an issue with from an Everton perspective with that?
Well, it's different because I think Wijnaldum's a really rare kind of player. If they had Wijnaldum, probably not. But yeah, I think I would with a different profile, definitely. Yeah. I think with something still to play for them, kind of you need a leader who's going to be there the following season, and yeah, I think I would. I'll just be honest. I'd like to see somebody else with it and somebody else leading the team out and kind of leading that charge. But it's all about personal point of views, and I guess that would just be mine if I was in that situation.
Yeah, no, it's a fair comment, but we will use that to round up. So, Dave, thanks for joining us, mate.
Yeah, thank you. Cheers, mate. Cheers, everyone.
And we will be back next week to review Manchester United and to look ahead. And maybe we'll talk about something else. Maybe we'll include some transfer stuff. We'll see where we go. But considering Liverpool have one game a week now, really, until the end of the season, maybe we've got a bit of space there to do something. So, any suggestions, do send them in. Put them in the comments and stuff. And we'll see you next week.